Mila James stepped through the ornate glass doors of the grand ballroom, her thrifted dress clinging loosely but modestly to her frame. Her shoes, simple and worn, tapped quietly against the polished marble floor. The glow from the crystal chandeliers overhead cast a sparkling light on the sea of guests clad in silks and satin, their laughter bubbling like fine champagne. The scent of expensive perfume mingled with the subtle aroma of fresh roses artfully arranged in golden vases, heightening the atmosphere of exclusivity. Mila paused at the entrance, swallowing a tentative breath. Her hands clutched a plain handbag as she scanned the room. White tuxedos, shimmering gowns, and glittering jewelry cascaded around her like waves. She silently soaked it all in, the soft hum of polite conversation, clinking glasses, and the gentle notes of a string quartet playing from the side of the room. She tried to steady her nerves, determined to make her presence known without drawing unwanted attention. But it was impossible to blend in. A nearby cluster of guests stole sidelong glances at her, their eyes narrowing with thinly veiled disdain. A sharp whisper floated to Mila's ears, "Who let the help in?" Another guest smirked and murmured just loud enough to be heard, "She looks like she wandered off the street." Their laughter was light but cutting, slicing through the delicate bubble Mila tried to maintain. Across the room, the charity gala chairwoman noticed her immediately. The woman's gaze lingered with covert suspicion, eyes flicking down to Mila's scuffed shoes, then her modest handbag, before sweeping over her posture and the way she held herself. A couple of guests nearby exchanged knowing looks and loud enough for others to hear. A man joked, "Surely, she belongs in the kitchen, not here." The laughter bubbled again, tightening the circle around Mila like an invisible barrier. The charity gala chairwoman, a tall woman with sharp features and a tightly pulled-back hairstyle, moved purposefully toward Mila. Her heels clicked authoritatively on the marble, drawing a few curious glances from nearby guests who sensed impending drama. Reaching Mila, the chairwoman assumed a polite yet icy demeanor. "Excuse me, miss," she said, voice crisp and controlled, as if in a rehearsed tone. "Can I help you? Are you lost? This is a private event, invitation only." Mila glanced up into the chairwoman's cold eyes, her heart quickening but her voice steady. "Thank you, but no. I'm here to support the cause and enjoy the evening." The chairwoman's thin lips curled into a smirk. "Enjoy the evening? You do realize this gala is for invited guests, not just anyone who wants to come in for a free meal or to rub shoulders with the wealthy, yes?" Mila blinked, swallowing the sharp sting those words carried. Around them, the murmur among guests began to swell, a ripple of interest that grew into outright amusement. The chairwoman, emboldened by the crowd's attention, raised her voice just enough for those nearby to hear. "I'd hate for there to be confusion. If you're not officially invited," she said pointedly, "you will need to use the staff entrance around back. This area is reserved for our honored guests." A few guests nearby chuckled. One man, his cufflinks gleaming, leaned toward his companion and whispered loud enough to be overheard, "Mistress of the staff entrance, perhaps?" Another woman nudged a friend, adding with a sly smirk, "Looks like the help was bold enough to try the front door." Phones emerged from clutch purses and breast pockets. Some guests began filming discreetly, the lens pointed at Mila and the chairwoman's unfolding confrontation. The glare from their phone screens brought a crescendo of laughter and whispered insults, as if the entire room took part in the public spectacle. Mila stood frozen, cheeks burning, her heart pounding wildly behind a fragile veil of calm. She felt the weight of every gaze like a physical force, pushing her down. She wanted to speak, to explain, maybe even defend herself, but words tangled in her throat. Her lips parted slightly, and she tried to keep her voice even. "I came because I believe in the work this gala supports." The chairwoman cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Believe in the work?" There are plenty of ways to contribute without making a scene in your thrift store attire and scuffed shoes. We cannot have this sort of distraction here. Another burst of laughter rippled through the cluster of guests surrounding them. Some openly mimicked Mila's modest dress, others whispered cruel jokes about her appearance. Mila lowered her gaze, biting the inside of her cheek to hold back tears. The humiliation was sharp, burrowing under her skin. For a moment, she felt as though the ground beneath her might give way. Suddenly, a tall man wearing a security badge stepped forward, his face expressionless. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." His voice was firm but not unkind. "No," Mila whispered, voice trembling but steady, "please, I didn't come to cause trouble." The chairwoman's eyes gleamed with triumph. "There's no trouble, just proper protocol. Escort her out, please." Firm but cautious, the guard took Mila gently by the elbow, guiding her toward the rear door marked "Staff Entrance." The room's attention locked tightly on them as they walked away. Whispers followed like shadows, and the occasional laugh or pointed finger erupted from several clusters. Mila stole a glance around as she walked, swallowing the lump in her throat. She noticed the faces of once friendly guests turned away, wallets closed, eyes lowered. No one stepped forward to offer support or even simple kindness. She felt profoundly alone. Outside near the dimly lit service alley, the guard released her arm and nodded, "You can go in this way." Mila paused, looking over her shoulder toward the bright ballroom. The echoing laughter and mocking whispers still floated through the rear entrance's narrow opening. She took a deep, shaky breath and stepped through, gripping the doorframe for a fleeting moment before disappearing into the shadows, her heart heavy but resolved not to let this moment define her. Back inside the glittering gala, the chairwoman returned to her private lounge with a quiet sense of satisfaction. She sank into an elegant leather chair, smoothing the fabric of her designer dress with a firmness that spoke more of control than comfort. Her assistant, a nervous young woman holding a silver tray with champagne flutes, hovered nearby. "That handled nicely," the chairwoman said, her voice low but sharp. "We must preserve the integrity of this event. This gala is not a charity circus open to anyone with a half-baked donation and worn shoes." She glanced upward, her eyes steely. "Imposters like that woman only dilute the prestige we've built." Her assistant nodded hesitantly, pouring a glass and setting it beside her. "Yes, ma'am. Exclusivity is everything here, and the sponsors expect an event that reflects their status." The chairwoman gave a grim smile. "Exactly. These people," she gestured vaguely toward the ballroom, "deserve an evening uninterrupted by awkward distractions. If we let in everyone who claims to believe in the cause, it becomes nothing but a charity market." From the adjoining ballroom came the familiar melody of the string quartet. Laughter rippled anew from clusters of guests who resumed their animated chatter and flirtations, the tension dissolving like morning mist in sunlight. Yet behind the scenes, away from the opulence and clinking crystal, Mila James sat quietly in a narrow hallway leading to the staff quarters. The hard concrete walls rose starkly, in harsh contrast to the shimmering gold and white just feet away. She wiped a tear quickly from her cheek, her hands shaking slightly as she took deep breaths to steady herself. Though she wore her pain invisibly, a fierce anger simmered beneath the surface. She had been dismissed, humiliated, branded unworthy by a group of people who valued appearances over impact. But she was not broken. Pulling out her phone, she scanned messages and emails from the hours before the gala. Amid congratulatory notes from volunteers and community leaders, one message stood out. "Mila, the mayor sent me to find you. Says you need to join him immediately." Her breath hitched. The mayor? Why would the mayor be here, and why were they looking specifically for her? Before she could formulate a response, a knock came at the door. An impeccably dressed aide entered briskly. "Ms. James?" he asked, voice professional but kind. "The mayor is expecting you. He wishes to speak with you in the main hall." Mila nodded, swallowing the swirl of emotions threatening to overtake her: surprise, hope, disbelief, melding into cautious curiosity. As she walked back toward the ballroom, the atmosphere shifted subtly. The aide led the way, and whispers rippled through the staff and guests who caught sight of Melissa's return. Phones appeared again, guests murmuring amidst themselves, faces showing flickers of concern and intrigue. "You're sure that's her?" a well-dressed woman whispered as she glanced across the room. "Yes," replied a man nearby. "The mayor's been personally involved in her foundation's work for years." The faint hum of conversation changed tone, from amusement to unsettled curiosity. Eyes tracked Mila as she advanced steadily toward the center of the gala. The aide held the door open, and Mila stepped into the glittering space once more, catching everyone's attention. The mayor, a dignified man in his mid-50s, stood near the podium. His easy smile faded slightly when he spotted her at the entrance. He moved quickly through a group of wealthy donors, reaching her with quiet purpose. "Mila," he greeted warmly, extending his hand. She took it, voice gaining strength. "Mayor Harris." He looked out at the crowd, raising his hand for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I'd like to take a moment to personally acknowledge Mila James." Conversations dimmed into a hush, and eyes turned toward Mila, who stood upright, composed despite the sudden spotlight. "Mila has generously funded many of the community programs we honor tonight," the mayor continued. "Her foundation has quietly improved lives across our city, often underappreciated by those who value flash over substance." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd, a mixture of admiration and shock. Guests exchanged glances, some whispering apologies as several recalled their previous dismissiveness. Mila felt the weight shift in the room, the exclusion replaced now by rueful acceptance. She kept her demeanor calm, eyes steady as the mayor's praise echoed around her. The chairwoman's face tightened visibly, disbelief clouding her features as she watched the woman she had so unkindly shunned recognized publicly. Phones slid from hands, eyes wide as the crowd digested the revelation. The mayor continued, "Mila chooses humility over grandeur. Tonight she chose modest clothing to honor the volunteers who often go unnoticed." Mila spoke softly but clearly, "I dressed simply because I came here straight from a project site. The work we do matters more than appearances. I believe this gala's success depends on the effort behind the scenes, not the glitter above." The room absorbed her words, the contrast between her quiet dignity and the earlier snobbery striking a chord. Guests who had laughed now moved closer, some extending hands in apology or admiration. The chairwoman shrank to the periphery, her power diminished by the undeniable truth standing before everyone. Mila offered a polite smile to the well-wishers but did not gloat. Her focus remained on the mission behind the gala rather than the sudden turn of recognition. As the string quartet resumed softer music, Mila took a moment to breathe in the atmosphere, not one of rejection, but of unexpected respect and new possibility. The ballroom air seemed to thicken with surprise as the mayor's announcement settled over the crowd like a sudden downpour. Mila James, once the subject of whispered derision, now stood illuminated by the spotlight, both literal and figurative, of recognition. The mayor gestured toward Mila. "Not only has she been a major donor, but Mila is the founder of the James Foundation, which has funded critical programs supporting housing, education, and emergency relief across the city. Without her quiet leadership, many of these initiatives may never have taken shape." The guests' collective intake of breath was audible. A shimmer of disbelief rippled through the crowd, eyes darting between Mila and the mayor, a stark contrast to the earlier dismissal that had seemed so certain. The chairwoman stood frozen near her table, color drained from her face. She blinked, refusing to process that the woman she had so casually humiliated had quietly built an empire of compassion and influence. The arrogance she'd shown now rendered hollow by the reality unraveling before her eyes. Voices at the far end of the room rose in hushed frenzy. Phones dropped to tables or clattered onto marble as people scrolled swiftly through social media, eyes widening at pictures of Mila and news articles celebrating the foundation's impact. A group who had clustered earlier near Mila, snickering still, now broke apart awkwardly, struggling to reconcile their insolence with newfound respect. Some murmured quick apologies, brushing against her as they sought to avoid the weight of their previous judgment. Mila greeted the change not with triumph but with grace. Her eyes scanned the room calmly, her presence steady and unshaken despite the sudden shift in attention. She smiled softly, the corners of her mouth lifting just enough to convey quiet strength. Facing those closest to her, she spoke in a voice both warm and measured. I dress simply not because I lack means, but because I made a personal vow years ago, to stay grounded in humility and purpose. Tonight, I arrived here directly from a volunteer effort, unchanged by opulence or expectation. Her declaration was received with a ripple of approval, some nodding thoughtfully as the explanation settled. It was clear that Mila's values ran deep, far beyond appearance or surface status. The mayor continued, Mila's presence here is a powerful reminder. True generosity requires no costume, and impactful leadership is often quiet, unassuming. Guests shifted in their seats, murmuring assent. The charity gala, once a stage for status and spectacle, now stood transformed by the simple authenticity Mila brought into the room. One well-known socialite, previously scoffing from a corner, stepped forward cautiously and offered a gentle bow of the head in acknowledgement. Others followed, some smiling nervously, others silently observing, their expressions a mixture of regret and newfound admiration. The chairwoman's eyes held a hollow resolve as she glanced around, sensing the tide turning decisively against her. Her voice, when it came, was clipped and brittle. This is not how the evening was planned. Mila's response was poised. Plans can change, Mrs. Longford. Sometimes for the better. Mrs. Longford, the chairwoman, fixed Mila with the faintest glimmer of grudging respect, but her posture sagged slightly under the weight of her earlier misjudgment made public. Around them, conversations blossomed anew, now centered on the causes and the collective impact possible when people come together across social strata. Mila's quiet power had punctured the veneer of exclusivity, reminding everyone present that compassion and impact speak louder than fashion or pedigree. As some guests approached her with questions and genuine smiles, Mila remained soft-spoken but steady, anchoring herself in the purpose behind the gala. The spotlight lifted, and the gala's mood warmed to one of sincere celebration, beneath the sparkling chandeliers, on polished floors that no longer reflected judgment but possibility. The chairwoman orbited the edges of the room, diminished but not defeated, while Mila's presence forged an unspoken promise that change, real, inclusive, lasting change, could begin here, tonight. In that moment, Mila James was not just a simple woman in humble dress, she was a living testament to vision, grace, and strength that none could ignore. The mayor's gaze swept the room, catching the chairwoman's shrinking figure by the entrance and then returning to the gathered guests with renewed authority. Mrs. Longford, he said firmly, his voice carrying easily over the murmurs, your conduct earlier was unacceptable. Our cause deserves better leadership than exclusion and humiliation. A hush fell, dense and expectant. The chairwoman's lips pressed into a thin line, defiance flickering briefly in her eyes before he added, tonight's gala will continue under new management. I am appointing a committee to oversee future events, one committed to inclusivity and respect. The word struck sharply, and the impact was immediate. Guests stiffened, exchanging loaded glances. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted, and the chairwoman's once commanding presence dissolved into awkward invisibility. Conversation snippets spoke volumes, talk of her arrogance, poor judgment, and concerns she had alienated key supporters. As the evening unfolded, whispers and pointed looks followed the chairwoman's subdued movements. Waiters avoided her path, socialites sidestepped her in murmured clusters. Phones buzzed with messages sharing the ordeal and casting her as a symbol of outdated elitism. The event continued with renewed warmth and purpose, but the undercurrent of change was undeniable. The chairwoman, once the unchallenged centerpiece, became a cautionary figure cloaked in faded authority. Later in a quiet hallway, the chairwoman encountered Mila alone, gathering her things near the exit. Their eyes met, a pause heavy with untold sentiments. The chairwoman's facade cracked, and she hesitated before murmuring, "Miss James, I am sorry for earlier. I misjudged you." Mila regarded her calmly, her voice gentle but firm. "It was not just a misjudgment, Mrs. Longford. It was a choice. I hope this moment teaches us both the importance of seeing beyond appearances." The chairwoman nodded, swallowing the lump of regret. Mila offered her a slight, enigmatic smile but said no more before turning and walking out, her step steady and resolute. Outside, the night air wrapped coolly around Mila as she emerged from the grand doors. The buzz of the gala faded behind her, replaced by a quiet confidence that never needed applause or validation. Guests lingered near the exit, watching silently as she moved through the crowd, her head held high against the stairs and whispered astonishment. She seemed to embody the very spirit of resilience and grace the mayor had highlighted. That night, the charity gala was forever altered, not just by the funds raised or speeches delivered but by the profound reminder that true leadership transcends titles and attire. In the months that followed, Mrs. Longford's removal became common knowledge in philanthropic circles. She faced public backlash, professional consequences, and was quietly reassigned to projects far removed from high-profile events. Her online reputation suffered as stories of her conduct circulated widely. Meanwhile, Mila continued her work with quiet determination, the gala's embrace only a stepping stone for her mission. Her foundation grew stronger, supported by genuine partnerships forged in respect rather than status. And though paths crossed occasionally, at events, in city halls, the chairwoman never approached Mila again, the lessons etched deeply in her silence. The final image of that night lingered long after the chandeliers dimmed, Mila James walking away from the gala, every stride an assertion of dignity and power. The room watched in stunned, reverent silence, forever marked by her presence and the shift she embodied, a reminder that worth is found in purpose and character, not just pedigree or dress.